Have you ever wondered what really happens after death? Across the world, from the grand cathedrals of Europe to the peaceful temples of Southeast Asia, two major religions, Christianity and Buddhism, have profoundly shaped how billions of people think about heaven and hell. In the West, many grow up hearing about heaven as a place of eternal joy and reunion, and hell as a realm of punishment for the wicked. In the East, Buddhist temples echo with stories of realms shaped by karma, merit, and rebirth. But what do these beliefs truly mean, and how do they differ? Why do some Christians speak with certainty about going to heaven, while others struggle with doubts or fear about judgment and hellfire? Why do many Buddhists talk about the endless cycle of birth and rebirth, and see heaven and hell not as permanent places, but as part of a cosmic journey? These questions aren't just theological, they touch real lives. In America, a grieving mother may find hope in the thought of seeing her child again in paradise. In Thailand, an elderly monk may calmly accept death, believing that his next life will reflect his actions in this one. Today, in a world more connected than ever, people are exposed to both traditions, sometimes in the same family. Mixed faith marriages, international communities, and global media mean more people than ever are asking, which view is true? Are heaven and hell real? If I was born in another country, would I believe something different? The answers shape not just what we hope for after death, but how we live our lives right now. This podcast explores, how do Christian and Buddhist views of heaven and hell really compare? What do believers in different countries actually believe? And how does it affect their daily lives, choices, and sense of right and wrong? Can these ancient ideas still speak to modern people facing suffering, uncertainty, or grief? Let's begin this journey together, setting aside stereotypes and really listening, not just to the teachings, but to the stories, struggles, and hopes of people around the world. Perhaps by the end, you'll see heaven and hell in a new light, or even find a way to make peace with these mysteries, no matter what you believe. And as you listen, ask yourself, if you could know the truth about what happens after death, would you want to? Or is the real question how these beliefs help us live, here and now, in this one precious life? When we look out into the world, we see the great diversity of belief and culture. In the West, Christianity weaves through the fabric of everyday life. Its teachings found not only in churches, but in art, literature, and even the rituals of birth, marriage, and death. In many Christian families, the idea of heaven is present from the very first stories told to children. Heaven is often described as a place where pain and suffering end, a home of eternal light, forgiveness, and reunion with those we love. Hell, on the other hand, is portrayed as a realm of darkness, separation, and torment, a warning and a mystery that lingers at the edge of the human imagination. Imagine a Sunday morning in a small town in Italy. The church bells ring out over cobblestone streets. Inside, a congregation gathers beneath stained glass windows. The priest speaks softly of hope, redemption, and the promise of heaven. People kneel and pray, some with tears in their eyes, asking for guidance, forgiveness, or the strength to carry burdens that sometimes feel too heavy to bear. For them, the idea of heaven is more than just a destination after death. It's a source of comfort, a promise that no matter how difficult life becomes, love and peace await beyond this world. The fear of hell, meanwhile, can be a powerful motivator. It shapes behavior, encourages confession, and leads some to seek forgiveness not only from God, but from one another.
There are stories passed down for generations about those who turned away from selfishness and cruelty because they wished to avoid the fires of hell and instead embraced kindness, honesty, and faith.
Cross the globe to the other side, to Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, or Japan, and the conversation around heaven and hell takes a different form. In Buddhist temples, the atmosphere is quieter, almost meditative. The walls may be decorated with images depicting not only the Buddha, but the countless realms through which beings are reborn, heavens of unimaginable beauty and bliss, but also hells of unspeakable suffering and fear. Monks teach about karma, the natural law of cause and effect. Good actions lead to good results, harmful actions to suffering, sooner or later. But here, heaven and hell are not seen as final destinations. They are rather temporary stops on the endless wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that goes on until a being achieves liberation, or nirvana. A young man in Bangkok might visit a temple to make merit for a deceased grandparent, lighting incense and offering flowers, hoping that his actions will ease his loved one's journey in the afterlife. He may listen to monks explain that even if someone is born into a heavenly realm, this happiness is impermanent. Eventually, when the merit that carried them there is exhausted, they will be reborn elsewhere, possibly in a human life or in a less fortunate realm, depending on their karma. In Buddhist teaching, the ultimate goal is not heaven, but freedom from the cycle itself, an awakening that ends suffering once and for all. In this vision, hells are not places of eternal damnation, but realms where beings experience the results of their negative actions, only until their karma has run its course. Both traditions, in their own way, offer explanations for the presence of suffering and injustice in the world. For Christians, the hope of heaven and the fear of hell are deeply tied to questions of morality and forgiveness. How does one earn a place in heaven? The answers vary among denominations, but often include faith in Christ, repentance for sins, and a life of love and service. For Buddhists, the focus is less on divine judgment and more on personal responsibility. The idea that every thought, word, and deed plant seeds that will ripen in this life or the next.
Consider, for example, the story of Maria, a nurse in Brazil. She works long hours in a public hospital, caring for the sick and the dying. When patients ask her what she believes happens after death, she shares her Christian faith with gentleness. She tells them that God loves each person and desires them to join Him in heaven, where there is no more pain or sorrow. For Maria, this belief gives meaning to her work. Even in the face of tragedy, she finds hope that suffering is temporary and that one day all wrongs will be made right. In contrast, let's meet Kenji, a Japanese businessman who, after losing his job, finds himself lost and uncertain about the future. He visits a Zen temple, seeking peace. There, the monk does not promise heaven or threaten hell. Instead, he encourages Kenji to meditate, to observe his thoughts and emotions without judgment, and to recognize the impermanence of all things. Through this practice, Kenji gradually learns to let go of fear and regret, to accept change, and to find a kind of freedom, even in the midst of uncertainty. As we look more closely at these beliefs, we see that they are not static or isolated from the world around them. Christianity and Buddhism have each, over centuries, adapted and responded to the cultures in which they took root. In Africa, for example, Christianity often blends with indigenous beliefs about ancestors and the spirit world, creating unique understandings of heaven and hell. In Tibet, Buddhist cosmology includes intricate maps of the afterlife, influenced by both Indian and native Bon traditions. Even within each religion, there are countless variations and debates. The idea of judgment is central in Christianity. Many Christians believe that at the end of one's life, or at the end of time, God will judge each soul, separating the righteous from the wicked. This judgment is often described in vivid imagery: streets of gold for the blessed, lakes of fire for the condemned. Some Christian traditions emphasize faith above all, teaching that belief in Jesus is the key to salvation. Others stress the importance of good works, charity, and living a moral life. There are even branches of Christianity, such as Universalism, that hold out hope that all souls will eventually be reconciled with God, and that hell, if it exists, is not eternal. Buddhism, by contrast, teaches that judgment comes not from an all-powerful deity, but from the natural unfolding of karma. After death, one's actions determine the next rebirth. In some Buddhist traditions, particularly in East Asia, there is a belief in judges of the dead, figures who weigh a person's deeds and assign them to an appropriate realm. But even here, the process is seen as impersonal and lawful rather than arbitrary or vengeful. Ultimately, every being has the potential to escape the cycle, no matter how many lifetimes it may take. There are many stories that illustrate how these beliefs shape lives. In rural Mexico, a devout Catholic family prays for their departed relatives during the annual Dia de los Muertos, believing that the souls of the dead return for a brief visit. They set up altars with favorite foods and photographs, hoping to bring comfort and blessings to those on the other side. The line between this world and the next feels thin, permeable, and filled with love. In contrast, a Thai grandmother might tell her grandchildren stories of pretas, hungry ghosts doomed to wander in suffering because of their greed or anger in a past life. She cautions them to be generous and compassionate, reminding them that their actions matter not just now, but far into the future. These tales are not meant to frighten so much as to encourage kindness and mindfulness. Sometimes the beliefs of different religions intersect and interact, especially in places where communities live side by side. In Singapore, it's not uncommon for families to observe both Buddhist and Christian rituals, lighting incense at a temple one week and attending church the next. People may draw comfort from both sets of teachings, blending them into a personal tapestry of meaning. In multicultural societies, questions about heaven and hell become invitations to dialogue, to listen, to learn, and to find common ground. Of course, there are also skeptics, those who doubt or reject the existence of any afterlife, seeing heaven and hell as metaphors or as tools for social control. They may argue that what matters most is how we live here and now, caring for one another, seeking justice, and making the world a better place. Even among believers, doubts are common. A young woman in Germany may struggle with the idea of hell, unable to reconcile it with her sense of God's love. An elderly man in Cambodia may wonder if the cycle of rebirth will ever truly end, or if it is simply another way of coping with the fear of death. Through all these stories and teachings, a thread runs: the desire to find meaning in suffering, to hope for happiness, and to understand our place in the universe. The visions of heaven and hell, whether they are seen as literal places, as states of mind, or as symbolic representations, give people language to talk about justice, mercy, hope, and despair. The Buddhist and Christian paths both acknowledge the reality of suffering, but they offer different maps for navigating it. Christianity often frames suffering as a test or as a path to redemption.
The image of Christ on the cross, a God who suffers with humanity, offers comfort to those who feel alone in their pain. The promise of heaven provides hope that suffering will not have the last word. In Buddhism, suffering is seen as a natural part of existence, the first of the Four Noble Truths. The way out, according to the Buddha, is through understanding the nature of suffering, letting go of attachment, and cultivating compassion and wisdom. The daily practices that flow from these beliefs are as varied as the cultures in which they are found. Christians may gather for communal worship, confession, and acts of charity. Buddhists may meditate, chant, make offerings, and observe ethical precepts. Both traditions encourage self-examination, humility, and a commitment to living in harmony with others. Both recognize the transformative power of love and forgiveness toward oneself and toward others. As the world changes, so do our questions about life, death, heaven, and hell. Scientific advances, encounters with other cultures, and the challenges of modern life force us to revisit and sometimes rethink the stories we tell. Yet at the heart of it all, the longing for hope, for meaning, and for connection remains. Perhaps what unites Christians, Buddhists, and people of all backgrounds is not the specific details of what happens after death, but the search for a life that matters, a life shaped by compassion, purpose, and the courage to face uncertainty. In this way, the ancient visions of heaven and hell still speak to us, calling us to reflect on our choices, our relationships, and the legacy we leave behind. As we continue this exploration, it may help to remember that the stories of heaven and hell across cultures and centuries have always been more than simple promises or threats. They are invitations to consider who we are, what we value, and how we can help one another on this mysterious journey from birth to death and, perhaps, beyond.
And so, whether you find yourself in a bustling city or a quiet countryside, in a grand cathedral or a humble temple, the questions remain. What do I believe about life after death? How do my beliefs shape the way I live, love, and let go? The search for answers continues, not just in books or sermons, but in the quiet moments of reflection, the choices we make each day, and the stories we share with those we love. The journey is far from over, and the path unfolds one step at a time. Sometimes the answers are not found in certainty, but in the willingness to keep seeking, questioning, and growing. Whether you are drawn to the Christian hope of heaven, the Buddhist vision of liberation, or the simple mystery of not knowing, your story matters. Your questions are part of a larger human conversation, a tapestry woven of faith, doubt, hope, and wonder. Let us continue walking this path together, open to the wisdom of many traditions, the experiences of others, and the quiet voice within our own hearts.
Throughout history, the ways in which people have related to the ideas of heaven and hell have been as diverse as the landscapes they inhabit. In Europe, majestic cathedrals soar toward the sky, their stained glass windows catching the light and illuminating stories of saints, martyrs, angels, and the final judgment. The architecture itself often inspires a sense of awe, drawing worshippers' eyes upward, evoking the transcendence of heaven and the mysterious depths of the soul. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of these grand structures, artists and theologians painted and wrote about the fires of hell, the torments awaiting those who strayed from the path, and the profound hope offered by grace and redemption. As a young child in Poland, Anna would accompany her grandmother to Sunday Mass. She remembers clutching her grandmother's hand tightly as the priest spoke of God's boundless love and the promise of paradise. But she also remembers the hush that would fall over the congregation when the topic of hell was raised. There was a sense that these were not just abstract ideas, but living realities, forces shaping how people made choices, treated one another, and approached the struggles of daily life. Anna's grandmother would often remind her that whatever happened in this world, it was the state of one's soul that truly mattered. Heaven was not merely a distant reward, but a guiding star for everyday living. Hell was not just a distant threat, but a cautionary tale urging humility, forgiveness, and constant reflection. In contrast, 1,000 miles away, in the gentle hills of Laos, monks begin each day before sunrise, gathering in the cool, misty air for morning chants and meditation. The stories passed down through generations speak of the myriad realms into which beings may be born, the blissful heavens ruled by radiant devas, the terrifying hells filled with suffering, and the world of humans where the balance of joy and pain creates the rare opportunity for awakening. Here, karma is not a distant concept, but an intimate companion, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Children grow up learning that even small acts, feeding a stray dog, speaking kindly to a stranger, refraining from anger, can plant seeds that will bloom into happiness or sorrow, not just for themselves, but for all beings.
The idea of responsibility is emphasized in both traditions, though it takes a different form. In many Christian communities, the focus is on the relationship between the individual soul and God. There is an awareness that one's actions, thoughts, and beliefs are seen, known, and ultimately judged by a loving but just Creator. The teachings of Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself, forgive as you wish to be forgiven, seek the lost, and care for the poor, are not merely suggestions, but commandments with eternal consequences. In some denominations, the sacrament of confession offers a pathway to forgiveness and renewal, a chance to start again, unburdened by guilt and fear. In Buddhist cultures, the relationship is less with a personal deity and more with the unfolding of natural law. There is no all-powerful judge deciding one's fate, but instead the quiet, relentless logic of cause and effect. When someone suffers, the question is not, "Why has God done this to me?" but rather, "What seeds have been planted, and what can I do to transform suffering into wisdom and compassion?" This perspective can foster a sense of empowerment, but also humility. No one escapes the consequences of their actions, but no one is beyond hope or redemption either. Every moment is an opportunity to choose differently, to begin again, to create merit for oneself and others. These differences are sometimes more visible during moments of crisis or transition, when someone dies, when a community faces disaster, or when a person's faith is shaken by loss or injustice. In a hospital in London, a Christian chaplain sits at the bedside of a dying man. She offers prayers, words of comfort, and the assurance that love endures beyond death. The family gathers around, sharing memories, singing hymns, and expressing their hope that their loved one will find peace in the presence of God. The rituals may vary, anointing with oil, reading from the Bible, lighting a candle, but the underlying message is one of connection, hope, and the promise that life does not end at the grave.
Meanwhile, in a remote village in Cambodia, a Buddhist monk performs a funeral ceremony for a woman who has passed away at the age of 90. The air is thick with the scent of incense, the sound of chanting, and the gentle murmur of prayers offered for the departed. The monk reminds the family that death is not an ending, but a doorway to a new existence shaped by the deeds of this life. Offerings are made not only for the benefit of the deceased, but as a means of cultivating generosity and mindfulness among the living. The hope is not for eternal bliss in a distant realm, but for a favorable rebirth, a gentle transition, and eventually liberation from the cycle altogether. Despite the differences, there are also remarkable similarities in how these traditions address the fears and hopes of the human heart. Both offer stories, rituals, and practices designed to help people navigate the uncertainty of life, to find courage in the face of suffering, and to make sense of experiences that often defy easy explanation. Both provide communities of support, spaces where grief can be expressed and healing can begin. As the world grows smaller through migration, technology, and the blending of cultures, people are increasingly exposed to a tapestry of beliefs about the afterlife. In Canada, a young man whose parents come from different religious backgrounds, one Christian, one Buddhist, finds himself attending both church services and temple ceremonies. He listens to sermons about heaven and salvation on Sundays, and on Buddhist holidays, he chants sutras for the well-being of ancestors. He wonders what is truly real, and whether he must choose one path or can honor both. His journey is echoed in countless others around the world as boundaries blur and the lines between tradition and innovation become less distinct. In America, the conversation around heaven and hell is often shaped by the broader culture of optimism, self-improvement, and individual freedom. Books and movies explore near-death experiences, visions of tunnels of light, and the possibility of second chances. For some, these stories reinforce traditional beliefs. For others, they spark new questions or open doors to spiritual exploration beyond the boundaries of any single faith. The internet is filled with forums, videos, and podcasts where people share personal encounters with the divine, struggles with doubt, and stories of transformation. Yet, beneath the surface, the fundamental questions remain. What does it mean to live a good life? How do we respond to suffering, injustice, and loss? What gives us hope in the face of death? And how do we comfort those who mourn? The answers, while shaped by culture and doctrine, are also deeply personal. For some, the promise of reunion in heaven motivates a life of faithfulness and service. For others, the commitment to breaking the cycle of suffering inspires daily acts of mindfulness, compassion, and letting go. The rituals and symbols surrounding heaven and hell can be powerful, but they are also fluid. In the Philippines, Catholic processions for All Saints' Day fill the streets with music, flowers, and candles, creating a sense of continuity between the living and the dead. In Tibet, sky burials reflect a Buddhist understanding of impermanence and the interconnectedness of all beings. In both cases, the boundary between this life and the next is honored, questioned, and ultimately embraced as part of a larger mystery. At times, the differences between Christian and Buddhist views of the afterlife become points of conflict or misunderstanding. There are stories of missionaries who struggle to convey the Christian message of salvation to Buddhist communities, and of Buddhists who find a Christian emphasis on faith and judgment unfamiliar or unsettling. There are debates over the meaning of key concepts: sin, grace, karma, merit, and the role of ritual, meditation, and prayer. Yet, more often than not, dialogue leads to greater understanding and respect. Interfaith marriages, friendships, and collaborations provide opportunities for growth, empathy, and shared purpose. Some people find themselves drawn to both traditions, seeking wisdom wherever it can be found. A young woman in Singapore practices mindful meditation, attends Christian Bible study, and volunteers at a local shelter. She sees value in the teachings of both Jesus and the Buddha, and her spiritual journey is marked by openness, curiosity, and a desire for connection. For her, the questions are more important than the answers, and the journey itself is an act of faith. The search for meaning is universal, and the stories we tell about heaven and hell reflect our deepest hopes, fears, and aspirations. In times of crisis, these stories can offer solace and strength. In moments of joy, they remind us to celebrate the beauty of life and to cherish the bonds we share. Over time, they evolve, adapt, and find new expression in art, music, literature, and the quiet moments of everyday living. For many, the practical implications of these beliefs are most evident in how they shape attitudes toward life, death, and morality. The Christian command to love and forgive, rooted in the hope of heaven, challenges individuals and communities to transcend bitterness, seek reconciliation, and work for justice. The Buddhist commitment to compassion and wisdom, grounded in the understanding of karma and rebirth, encourages mindful living, non-harming, and the pursuit of liberation for all beings. As we reflect on the stories, rituals, and teachings that have been passed down through generations, we may find ourselves drawn into a larger conversation, one that spans continents, centuries, and cultures. We encounter voices from the past and the present, each adding a unique perspective to the tapestry of belief. Some speak with certainty, others with humility and wonder. All invite us to consider the possibility that whatever lies beyond this life, we have the capacity to shape our destiny through the choices we make, the love we give, and the wisdom we seek. Walking through the ancient streets of Rome, a visitor marvels at the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica. The air is thick with the prayers of millions who have come seeking hope, forgiveness, and a glimpse of the eternal. In the quiet corners of the city, smaller churches offer sanctuary to those in need, a reminder that heaven is not only a promise for the future, but a presence felt in acts of kindness, generosity, and peace. In a rural Thai village, a group of lay people gathers to listen to a wandering monk speak about the impermanence of life. The monk's words are simple but profound. Everything that arises will pass away. True happiness is found not in clinging to fleeting pleasures, but in understanding the nature of suffering and cultivating a heart of compassion. The listeners nod, some in agreement, others lost in thought, each carrying the teaching into their own lives in their own way. Across cultures, the stories of heaven and hell invite us to imagine what might be possible, to hope for a world beyond suffering, to strive for reconciliation, to trust in the possibility of transformation. They challenge us to look beyond our immediate concerns, to ask what it means to live with purpose, integrity, and grace. For the Christian, the image of heaven is a promise rooted in love, the love of God for creation, the love of Christ for humanity, and the love that binds communities together. It is a vision of reunion, peace, and everlasting joy. For the Buddhist, the goal is not a place or a reward, but an awakening to the truth of existence, the end of suffering, the realization of interdependence, and the cultivation of boundless compassion. These visions, though distinct, are not mutually exclusive. They speak to different dimensions of the human experience, offering maps for the journey through joy and sorrow, hope and despair. They encourage us to look inward, to examine our motives, and to seek the good of others as well as ourselves. In doing so, they open the door to a deeper understanding of what it means to be fully alive. The path is rarely easy, and the answers are seldom clear. Doubt, confusion, and pain are as much a part of the spiritual journey as faith, certainty, and peace. Yet, in the act of questioning, seeking, and listening, we discover a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught, but only lived. In the end, perhaps the greatest gift of the stories of heaven and hell is not certainty, but the invitation to live with humility, courage, and compassion. They remind us that whatever our beliefs about the afterlife, the present moment is precious, and the opportunities for love, forgiveness, and growth are infinite. The journey continues, one breath at a time, guided by the light of many traditions and the quiet longing of the human heart. Sometimes, the search for meaning leads people far from home, across borders of country and belief. In cities filled with the sound of many languages, new generations grow up surrounded by a blend of traditions. An American student studies Buddhist philosophy in Japan and learns to meditate in a temple where incense drifts upward in soft curls. A Thai businesswoman travels to Rome and steps quietly into a cathedral, gazing at the flickering candles, listening to the echo of ancient prayers. She wonders about the differences and the subtle kinship between her own traditions and those of the people around her. Everywhere, stories of heaven and hell serve as guideposts for living, but they also evolve with each new era. In the Middle Ages, vivid paintings and stained glass windows in European churches brought the torments of hell and the bliss of heaven to life for those who could not read. In modern times, films, novels, and television invite new generations to imagine what might await beyond death's door. These changing images reflect more than just religious doctrine. They reflect deep desires and anxieties about justice, mercy, belonging, and the fate of the soul. One evening in Buenos Aires, a family gathers around the table after a funeral. There is sadness, but also warmth, memories, and shared laughter. The grandmother gently reminds everyone that their loved one is now with God, free from pain. Later, as the city grows quiet, she lights a candle and sits in silence, sending prayers for her child's peaceful journey. For her, the promise of heaven is as real as the love that fills the room. Thousands of miles away, on a mountainside in Bhutan, a group of villagers makes offerings of rice and butter lamps to honor the memory of their ancestors. The local lama leads prayers, and children listen as he explains how the deeds of one life ripple outward, shaping not only future rebirths, but the fate of entire families. The vision of many heavens and hells, each reflecting different qualities of mind, is not a threat, but an encouragement to live with mindfulness, patience, and generosity. For many, these rituals and stories are sources of comfort and strength. For others, they are a starting point for deeper inquiry. In bustling university campuses and quiet monasteries alike, seekers of all ages gather to discuss questions that are both ancient and profoundly personal. Is heaven a place or a state of mind? Is hell eternal, or can every being eventually be redeemed? What happens to those who do not believe, or whose lives were marked by suffering and injustice? The answers vary, but the spirit of curiosity and respect endures. Over time, both Christian and Buddhist communities have adapted their teachings to address the realities of the modern world. In many churches, sermons now speak not only of the afterlife, but of the kingdom of heaven as something to be built here and now, through acts of compassion, social justice, and solidarity with the poor and the oppressed. In Buddhist centers, teachers emphasize not only the hope of favorable rebirth, but also the urgency of confronting suffering directly, both within oneself and in society at large. Young people especially are asking new questions and forging new paths.
Some are drawn to ancient rituals and sacred spaces, seeking connection to something greater than themselves. Others look for meaning in music, art, or activism, working to heal the wounds of the world. Across continents, there are movements for interfaith dialogue, where Christians, Buddhists, and people of other faiths meet not to debate, but to share stories, meals, and the everyday struggles of being human. Technology has made these encounters both easier and more complex. It is now possible to listen to a Buddhist Dharma talk broadcast live from a temple in Thailand, and moments later to join a virtual prayer service in a cathedral on the other side of the globe. Online forums are filled with conversations about heaven and hell, personal journeys through grief and hope, and practical questions about how to live with integrity, courage, and love. The boundaries between traditions, once so sharply drawn, are increasingly porous. People borrow practices from one another, meditation, prayer, song, and silence, without feeling the need to choose a single path. Even so, the deeper questions remain. How do we make sense of suffering that seems undeserved, or of joy that appears fleeting? What is the purpose of life, and how do we find peace with the uncertainty that death brings? For some, the answers are found in faith, a trust that there is meaning and purpose beyond what can be seen or proven. For others, meaning is created moment by moment in acts of kindness, creativity, and presence. In small towns and great cities alike, people gather for funerals, weddings, and ordinary celebrations, weaving together rituals old and new. There are prayers for the dead and blessings for the living, songs of praise and moments of quiet reflection. Each gathering is a testament to the enduring power of community, the way people come together in joy and sorrow, seeking comfort and hope in one another. The language of heaven and hell gives shape to the most intimate experiences of loss and longing. When a loved one dies, the pain can feel overwhelming and the need for assurance is deep. Sometimes it is enough to believe that the person is at peace, free from pain, embraced by something larger than human understanding. Other times, questions linger. What becomes of those who have caused harm or who suffered without justice? Can forgiveness reach even into the darkest places? In both Christian and Buddhist traditions, there are stories of mercy that transcends all boundaries. In Christianity, the image of the prodigal son welcomed home, the lost sheep sought and found, and the promise of grace that cannot be earned or lost. In Buddhism, the tales of great bodhisattvas who vow never to enter nirvana until every being is free from suffering. These stories do not erase the reality of pain, but they invite listeners to consider the possibility of redemption, reconciliation, and the transformative power of love. At the same time, both traditions caution against complacency. Heaven and hell are not only destinations after death, but realities that can be created and experienced here and now. A heart filled with hatred, greed, or fear becomes its own prison. A mind trained in kindness, forgiveness, and wisdom opens to glimpses of paradise, even in the midst of hardship. The journey toward understanding is ongoing, shaped by each new relationship, challenge, and loss. In hospitals and hospices, chaplains and spiritual care providers sit with the dying, listening more than speaking, honoring the unique beliefs and fears of each person. In prisons and shelters, volunteers offer presence and hope to those who feel abandoned or forgotten. In classrooms and workplaces, teachers and colleagues strive to model compassion and fairness, planting seeds for a better future. Sometimes faith is a quiet certainty. Other times it is a fragile hope or a determined act of will. Doubt is not the enemy of belief, but a companion that keeps the search alive.
In moments of grief, confusion, or wonder, the stories of heaven and hell provide a language for wrestling with what cannot be fully understood. Across the world, artists and writers use the symbols of the afterlife to explore questions of meaning, justice, and beauty. In poetry, a glimpse of heaven might be found in a child's laughter or the turning of autumn leaves. In music, the ache of longing for a lost friend is transformed into song. In visual art, the contrasts of light and shadow evoke the eternal dance between hope and despair. The traditions of Christianity and Buddhism each offer practices for facing suffering with courage and for cultivating joy in the midst of impermanence. Christians may find comfort in prayer, sacraments, and the assurance of being known and loved by God. Buddhists may turn to meditation, chanting, and the wisdom of teachers who have walked the path before. Both encourage acts of service, generosity, and the daily practice of loving one's neighbor. As the years pass, individual faith journeys are marked by moments of clarity and times of confusion. There are seasons of certainty and seasons of searching. In every tradition, there are teachers, elders, and companions who walk alongside, sharing stories and guiding others through times of darkness and light. Many people come to see heaven and hell not as distant places, but as symbols of the mind's capacity for transformation. When anger or bitterness take hold, life becomes narrow and painful, like wandering in a desert. When love, forgiveness, and understanding grow, even the most ordinary moments are suffused with a quiet radiance. The afterlife, in this sense, is less a destination than a mirror reflecting the choices, intentions, and relationships of each day. In moments of quiet, alone with our thoughts, these questions return. What legacy do I wish to leave? How do I wish to be remembered? What will endure when I am gone? For some, the hope is for reunion with loved ones in a world beyond suffering. For others, it is the wish to be of benefit here and now, to lighten the burdens of others, and to contribute in some small way to the unfolding story of humanity. Whether in sacred spaces or on busy streets, the invitation is the same: to look with kindness on ourselves and others, to listen deeply, to seek wisdom, and to offer what we can. The images of heaven and hell can inspire awe or fear, but they also encourage humility, gratitude, and the courage to face the unknown. In the end, each person must find their own way through these mysteries. The stories we inherit, the teachings we embrace, and the practices we cultivate shape the journey. But no path is walked alone. Through love, friendship, and the patient work of understanding, the burdens of fear and sorrow are lightened. The promise of heaven and the warning of hell are transformed, not into threats or guarantees, but into calls to live with greater awareness, honesty, and care. Each dawn brings another chance to begin again, to ask new questions, to offer forgiveness, to seek joy, and to accept sorrow. The stories of heaven and hell are never finished. They are rewritten each day in the lives of those who listen, reflect, and act with compassion. And as the day fades and the world grows quiet, there remains a sense of wonder, a feeling that something larger than ourselves is at work. Whether named or unnamed, believed or doubted, the longing for meaning, peace, and connection endures. It is this longing that gives rise to the stories, rituals, and communities that sustain us, drawing us ever onward, one step at a time, toward a mystery that can never be fully captured in words. When the sun sets and the world grows quiet,
there comes a natural time for reflection, for letting go of the day's busyness and turning inward. This is often when questions about life, death, and what lies beyond come to the surface, sometimes softly, sometimes with a sense of urgency. People everywhere, whether alone in a silent room or surrounded by family, feel the weight of these questions. They may reach for comfort in familiar words or seek answers in new places, listening for the wisdom that might bring peace or clarity. As the days and years unfold, each person's journey through faith, doubt, hope, and searching takes on a unique shape. Some find comfort in the certainties of tradition, trusting that the paths walked by generations before them lead to places of safety and belonging. Others become wanderers, moving between beliefs, searching for what feels true, sometimes settling for a time, sometimes continuing the search, always yearning for something that speaks to the heart's deepest longing. In this way, the stories of heaven and hell, of salvation and liberation, become not just doctrines or rules, but companions on the winding path of life. The questions do not disappear with age or achievement. A child may ask where their beloved pet has gone after it dies. An elderly woman may wonder whether she will see her parents again long after her own children have grown. In times of happiness, people may find themselves giving thanks for blessings that feel undeserved, glimpsing something of heaven in a laugh, a sunrise, or the quiet hand of a friend. In times of sorrow, the same people may look for reassurance that the pain they feel is not the end of the story, that love does not vanish with death, that forgiveness and hope remain possible. Throughout the world, these questions echo in every language, in every home. In bustling cities where bright lights never fade, people lie awake at night and ponder the meaning of their lives. In remote villages where stars burn clear and close, old stories are told around firelight, weaving comfort and mystery into the fabric of each generation. The longing for meaning is older than any religion and wider than any one tradition. It rises from the depths of what it means to be human, vulnerable, and aware that life is both precious and fleeting. Sometimes the search for answers brings people together. In communities shaped by Christianity, the hope of heaven often becomes a source of unity and strength. People gather to sing, pray, and share meals to mark the important moments of life with ritual and song. At weddings and funerals, christenings and memorials, the language of faith gives words to both joy and grief, promising that neither is meaningless. The vision of heaven is not just a distant place, but a reminder to cherish love, to forgive, and to trust that all is held within the care of something greater. In Buddhist traditions, gatherings may be quieter, marked by the sound of chanting, the fragrance of incense, the offering of food and flowers. Here, the goal is not a place to escape suffering, but a way of being that transforms suffering itself. Teachers speak of the mind as the creator of both heaven and hell, reminding listeners that each moment offers the chance to plant new seeds, to let go of anger or attachment, to cultivate wisdom, generosity, and equanimity. Life is seen as a journey of awakening, not toward a paradise elsewhere, but toward an understanding of the world as it truly is, luminous and interconnected. These different ways of seeing the world sometimes blend in surprising ways. In multicultural cities, families celebrate both Christmas and Vesak, attend both church and temple, and create new rituals that reflect the richness of their experiences. Children learn stories from both sides, growing up with an openness that is itself a kind of grace. They learn that the questions about heaven and hell are less about finding one right answer and more about learning how to live together, to care for one another, and to walk gently in a world that is always changing. Over the years, many people come to see that the heart of every spiritual path is not just belief in an afterlife, but the call to love and to live fully in the present. The images of heaven and hell can inspire awe or caution, but their deeper meaning lies in the transformation they invite. To believe in heaven is to look for goodness in others, to act with hope and kindness, to lift up those who are struggling. To contemplate hell is to recognize the suffering that comes from cruelty, greed, and ignorance, and to commit to lessening that suffering wherever possible. Whether or not these realms exist in some other world, they are present here and now in the quality of each person's heart, the health of each community, the peace of each society. At the same time, spiritual traditions remind us to be gentle with ourselves and others in the face of uncertainty. No one knows with absolute certainty what awaits after death, and the great teachers of every path have acknowledged the limits of human understanding. What matters is not to erase doubt, but to hold it with humility, to let it keep us curious and open, to let it lead us deeper into the mysteries of existence.
In quiet moments, many find comfort in practices that draw them close to something sacred. A man kneels in prayer, feeling the weight of his troubles ease for a moment as he releases them to God. A woman sits in meditation, her breath rising and falling like the tide, her mind growing still as she remembers that each thought is like a passing cloud. A child closes their eyes and listens to a story, picturing a world where all beings are safe, loved, and free. In each of these moments, there is a sense of connection to the past, to others, and to the boundless unknown. Sometimes, the most profound wisdom comes not in words, but in silence. Friends gather at the bedside of someone who is dying and find that no words are needed. The presence of love is enough. The boundaries between life and death, between heaven and earth, grow thin, and for a moment there is only gratitude, acceptance, and peace. As years go by, people often become more patient with the questions that once troubled them. They see that suffering is part of life, but so is joy. They learn that love endures beyond loss, that kindness can transform even the hardest heart, and that every moment is an opportunity to begin again. The stories of heaven and hell continue to evolve, shaped by new discoveries, changing cultures, and the creativity of those who dare to imagine a better world.
In the face of tragedy and injustice, the hope of heaven and the call to compassion remain as urgent as ever. Faith becomes not an escape from the world's problems, but a reason to engage more deeply, to seek justice for those who are oppressed, to comfort those who are grieving, to heal what has been broken. The teachings of Christ, the wisdom of the Buddha, and the insights of countless other voices echo in the hearts of all who seek a way forward through darkness and doubt. At the same time, people learn to honor the boundaries of mystery, to let go of the need for absolute certainty, and to rest in the simple beauty of the present moment. The search for heaven may lead through many landscapes, faith and doubt, joy and sorrow, birth and death. But every step is an invitation to be more fully alive, to love more deeply, and to trust that whatever lies ahead, it is held in a greater story. Around the world, the language of heaven and hell is woven into poetry and prayer, into song and silence, into the ordinary and the extraordinary moments of life. It shapes the way people say goodbye to the dying and welcome the newborn, the way they celebrate, mourn, and dream. For some, these stories remain central, guiding every decision and shaping the course of life. For others, they become part of a larger tapestry, a source of wisdom to be drawn upon when needed, a comfort in times of uncertainty, a challenge in times of complacency.
There is a quiet courage in continuing to ask, to wonder, and to seek meaning, even when answers seem elusive. The stories of heaven and hell remind people that they are not alone in their searching, that across time and culture, others have walked the same path, faced the same fears, and found solace in hope, in love, and in the willingness to embrace mystery. In the end, perhaps the greatest gift of these stories is the way they encourage compassion for oneself and others. They ask us to imagine not only what comes after this life, but what is possible within it. They call us to forgive, to heal, to build communities of belonging, and to reach out across every divide with empathy and understanding. They remind us that whatever we believe about the afterlife, our lives here and now are an opportunity to create beauty, to share kindness, and to make peace with ourselves and with the world. As dusk gives way to night, there is comfort in the thought that the journey continues. The search for heaven, the struggle with suffering, the longing for connection, all these are part of what it means to be human. Whether walking the path of faith or inquiry, whether holding fast to tradition or venturing into the unknown, each person is part of the great story that links all generations. So the questions endure. What is heaven? What is hell? Will I see my loved ones again? How should I live, knowing that all things pass away? The answers are as varied as the people who ask them, but in the asking itself, there is meaning. In every prayer, every act of kindness, every moment of gratitude, the boundaries between heaven and earth grow thin, and the ordinary becomes extraordinary. As you listen to the quiet at the end of the day, or watch the first light of morning, you may sense the presence of something gentle and vast, a peace that passes understanding, a hope that endures through every trial. The journey is not finished, but it is filled with companions, with teachers, and with moments of unexpected grace. In the stories we share, the questions we ask, and the lives we lead, the ancient visions of heaven and hell continue to inspire, to challenge, and to comfort. They remind us that while the future is uncertain and the mysteries of existence remain, the invitation to live with love, wisdom, and courage is always present. And that, perhaps, is the greatest promise of all.